So how can one, or how should one train oneself to become unaffected by harsh speech or by evil actions done by others towards oneself?
Aimed at oneself, or
Yeah. Like if people are insulting you,
right?
how do you make
Well,
yourself?
the suttas were quite clear on it. You would endure the harsh speech, the insults, in the same manner you would endure the elements. In the same manner you would endure wind, rain, heat or cold, or bites of insects. You also endure the harsh words. So it's really there's no brainer in the sense of you need to really figure it out. It just comes down to being able to endure it without resorting to ill will yourself. And the only reason people cannot endure it is because the habit of acting out of it, it's just too established, and they keep maintaining it. So in order to break that habit of acting out of ill will, you just need to stop acting out of ill will and endure that unpleasant feeling that arises when somebody attacks you verbally, or because no amount of things said at you can actually harm you. It's you not being able to keep the mind away from it, you not being able to withstand things that are said at you. You jump into it, and that's why you suffer. That's why you get affected by it. So when people get offended, nobody denies the offensive words, but you becoming offended, that's on you. That's on your own inability to keep your mind out of it. As the Buddha said in that simile, when he was walking Pindapat, when that man came in front of a man's house and he started shouting abuse at him, this man, and as the Buddha was walking away, he turned to the man and said, well, let me ask you something. If you have guests come to your home and you give them gifts, but they don't take them, who do those gifts stay for? And the man said, well, of course they stay for me. They're my gifts. If they didn't take them, they stay for me. So, well, so it's with your insults and your harsh words. I'm not taking them, so it just stays with you. And it's not just a poetic kind of poetic put down. It's genuine. Phenomenologically, that's what happens if the mind does not respond with ill will to ill will. The only experience with ill will that's left is the experience of that man. So he's the only one left with anger. But if the Buddha did give in to anger and then replied something or put him in his place out of anger and so on, well, then there would have been an engagement and that would have fueled further, and then the man would have not. But he just, by not responding to it, by being able to take it without being actually affected by it, it highlighted that no amount of abuse can actually step outside of that man's experience. So he was the only one left with that painful anger, nobody else.
That sutta that you are talking about, I got a little excerpt from it.
Oh, okay, go on.
And I'll just read it short. It says, the Buddha says, whoever returns insult to one who is insulting, returns taunt to one who is taunting, returns a berating to one who is berating, is said to be eating together, sharing company with that person. But I am neither eating together nor sharing your company, Brahman. It's all yours. It's all yours.
Okay, so that's what he said. Right. What sutta is that? Where is it?
I don't have the reference here, but...
okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of.
Yeah.
I didn't remember the rest of it, but...
So, what it reminds me of another sutta as well, I'll come to, that forbearance, patience with a person who is getting angry at you, that is said to be the foremost good. The foremost good for you, the foremost good for that person. But others would say, well, if you don't react, you don't respond to that person, you don't fight back, then that person you just stay patient and calm and act like a weak person in front of that person.
Right.
He's just going to attack you even more. He's going to just chase you. Yeah. So you should fight back. You should, with the stick, they say.
Well, that comes out of a confusion. between what weakness is. You're weak when you're mentally affected by someone's anger. As there is usually, in practical terms, when somebody is affected mentally, that's when they start acting bodily to defend themselves. And that's how you show your weakness, by being affected mentally. Now, people who think that, oh, you must do something in return, otherwise you'll be perceived weak, they confuse doing something in return with being affected mentally. Because if you're not affected mentally and you don't do anything in return, the other person will see that. They will see that you are not bullied mentally, despite not fighting back physically. They can't break the mind, literally. That's on you. You give in to that or not.
But then,
so in other words, you cannot retaliate physically without being affected mentally. But you can remain unaffected mentally and not do anything physically. Doing something physically in return requires you to be affected mentally. Now, in order to not be affected mentally, you first need to stop entertaining the habit of doing something physically that requires mental affect as well underneath. So once you stop acting physically, then you highlight for yourself the fact that the problem is not you, oh, I should have done this, I should have done that. No. All I should have done is not allow myself to be affected mentally. And then whatever you do, it will be fine.
How are you not mentally affected?
Well, you can reflect. How would it be to endure elements? Endure the heat or cold? If you don't know, well, expose yourself to it a bit. Just don't pursue comfort, physical comfort all the time in your life. Experience some discomfort and then see how mind rebels against it. I want to make you, I want to get rid of it. It's the same attitude towards harsh speech or towards random insults.
But you can't really go and try and find harsh
Well,
speech.
you don't have to really go and find it. I mean, you just need to, it's going to come to you sooner or later. But in that sense, yeah, what you can go and find is physical discomfort that the mind doesn't want to endure with, doesn't want to deal with. And by training in regard to that, you're training in regard to the mental discomfort as well. And then when the harsh speech does come, well, you're already trained from not reacting.
But some people can endure, the elements, extreme elements, push themselves to limits. But when someone challenges their views on their nationality or whatever they believe, oh, God doesn't exist, then there's a fight.
Well, that's why it's not like you can't just go and endure elements and expect wisdom to come out of it. You need to know what you're supposed to look for. So that's what I'm saying. If you know what if you know that the nature of being insulted, being challenged, like on no particular ground, just gratuitous insult or offense, that equals enduring the elements. But if you don't know that, you won't look for that when you endure the elements, which means then you won't be trained in regard to it.
There's something to do with taking things personally.
Absolutely, yeah,
with the weather, with the elements.
Well, feeling entitled to break away from discomfort, for example, in physical terms, or taking things personally when somebody verbally says something to you that you don't like. You can't help but take it personally. Well, you can help, but you haven't been training yourself to help. So now the habit is just take it personally and then just lash out because he deserves it. And I mean, people can take that so far when you get the outrage culture, like in Europe, for example, they witness obviously. It's just people get outraged, furious over things that don't even concern them. Now that doesn't mean I shouldn't do anything about rectifying wrong, but you shouldn't get angry on account of random wrong. That's not rectifying the wrong can be done without the anger. But if you're acting out of anger, then the purpose of your action is just acting out of anger. No amount of lofty goal can uproot that anger and make it wholesome. By the way, is there enough light? I'm not too dark on the screen.
It's getting a bit darker.
Okay.
A bit darker. So, what is the correct response then to an aggressive person?
Physically aggressive or verbally aggressive?
Well, yeah, both.
Well, I mean, if your life is physically threatened, again, you don't have to, obviously, you know, we're not talking about killing or harming, but if you can subdue the person to give yourself enough room to escape, that's fine. If you can just escape, that's even better. But when it comes to verbally aggressive, again, same. The main response is to not respond. And recognize, well, there is no communication here, obviously, so you don't try to change your mind, so you just remove yourself from that situation.
How about the simile of the soul that the Buddha gave, you know?
Yeah, that's when you can't escape.
Yeah.
That's what you cannot escape when they catch you and start sawing your limbs.
So
well, even then,
you cannot
exactly,
escape.
simile of the soul, when highway robbers saw you limb by limb savagely, again, doesn't mean you don't feel any pain, but the Arahant, the enlightened person, the one who has fulfilled the Buddha's teaching, he doesn't feel anger towards them on account of such extreme action. And that is something you should train for. People would dismiss that, oh, that's a tall order. Well, if you don't aim for a tall order, how can you expect to arrive at anything if you've made a compromise before you even started practicing? So just contemplate. How would it be? How would you feel if somebody physically attacks you? Like life-threatening attack.
And you can't get away.
And you can't get away, and you can't defend yourself. They're greater in number, stronger than you. How would you feel? Would your mind be overwhelmed by that experience? If so, there is a work for you. You don't need to go and seek out the danger. You just think about it, and it will bring the experience of it sufficiently enough to be able to contemplate.
But it does say about pervading the world with kindness. You know, one should train in pervading the world with kindness.
Right. Pervading the world, sure.
Yeah.
Pervading your experience of the world with non-ill will, which is what kindness is. Yeah. Not like aiming at person individually. Oh, I love you, I love you, I love you too. No, pervading with kindness means being incapable of ill will towards the framework on the basis of which experience of others manifests. So if your mind has discerned the phenomenon of ill will and anger and has stopped entertaining it, no amount of people or circumstances coming your way with anger will be able to provoke you angrily. And that means your mind is above anger. That's the definition. Whatever you do then, it will be kind, as in it will be not based in ill will.
So let's say someone has already harmed you.
Uh-huh.
So you've been harmed in the past. And
Well, what has been harmed in the past? That's the thing.
Me.
Well, what part of me? What can other person relate to when they relate with you? What can they see? What can they aim at? What can they harm or not harm?
My body.
Exactly. So the body that you appeared with has been harmed, but you can't help but take it personally. So thus, I was harmed. But that's on you. You don't have to. Body being harmed is not on you, but you taking that body, which can be harmed or was harmed or could be harmed, that's on you. So you take that which doesn't belong to you, and because of that, you make yourself liable to harm. And again, it comes from the self-entitlement that we all have, obviously, especially when you just live a normal life without any effort to develop your mind. You think you have every right to pleasure, to sense pleasures, every right to pursuit of satisfaction, and you have every right to avoid pain. That's only true in a relative sense, because fundamentally you don't have right to that which can experience pleasure or experience pain, namely your senses. They're not yours. You're paid with. They're given. You borrow them. Yet you act like you're their master. And then when they don't go your way, your mastery, the core of your very being is very compromised, and that's very unpleasant. So that's how you forgive the past insults or harm done to you. You realize that it cannot be done to you, as in to your point of view, to your experience as a whole. It can only be done to one aspect of it that others can perceive and relate to, that you don't need to take personally.
So you're saying that is the and what it sounds like, that is the only cure.
Truly, that's a true forgiveness.
Yeah. for overcoming past.
Overcoming
abuses
past, overcoming future liability, overcoming present there things.
Yeah, safety for the people.
Yeah. That's the thing. If the Dhamma is applied correctly, you don't have to. I mean, obviously, you have to do it repetitively, as in training yourself and develop it. But if it's developed rightly, it affects present and past through present and future through that present. As the Buddha said, one who understands that not self, not myself, he understands that he has that insight. He also understands the past, so he stops thinking, oh, I was in the past, now I'm not anymore, or I will not be in the future, or I will be in the future. No, that whole domain of temporal existence is uprooted by this understanding. That whether it was the past, future, present, it's not mine. It could have not been mine.
So revenge is not an option.
No, absolutely, because engaging in revenge means engaging upon the act that's fully founded in the perversion of that principle of not mine, which means you took it as mine, which means it implies revenge, retaliation, saying back with ill will. It implies that taking up as mine, taking up as I can act upon this. And then how can you undo it if you keep acting wrongly out of it and you maintain that wrong order?
So there's the most common questions for a human being is, why am I here? You know, how did this universe begin? Who created the world? What is what is my meaning of life? What's going on? Where am I going? Where do I come from?
Right.
But then, if you read the suttas, those questions are wrong,
Right.
in a sense. I wonder if you could. Why are they wrong?
Why are they wrong?
Well, I'm supposed to question things.
Because they come out of that mistake of assuming the ownership, mastery, assuming the master self of the experience. They come out of that wrong order that I was just talking about. So where did I come from? What is my purpose? It's all based on that self-center, or the center of self. And as such, providing any answer just affirms the wrong order. You know, if somebody comes with a wrong premise and asks you a question, whereby if you answer it, well, you give the validity to the premise that they wrongly assumed as a basis of the question. So that's why the Buddha just wouldn't answer. Or he would give the Paticcasamuppada. He would say, with the rising of this, this arises. With the rising of ignorance, determinations manifest, and so on. And people are like, how does that relate to? Well, exactly, it relates to directly explaining you, well, not explaining, directly describing you that principle of perversion, of Paticcasamuppada with the grain, or Paticcasamuppada against the grain, if it's developed properly. And that would undo that wrong order, simultaneously present wrong order of you taking that which is not yours as mine, and then those questions would cease. They would be meaningless.
So what questions would you have instead, if those questions became?
Why do I suffer? How can I free myself from suffering? Am I really a master of my experience? In control of my life? Can I not get sick? Can I not be aging? Can I make sure my heart never stops? Can I not get cancer? Can I not die?
Yeah, that's the importance.
Yeah. Well, fundamentally, just keep asking yourself, in regard to whatever you do, just keep asking yourself, why do I want to do this?
Or why am I asking this question?
Even that, why am I asking myself this? Because the world, the senses pull you out, they direct you out, they entice you out with pleasures and so on. Asking these questions would keep sort of pointing back inwards, but not in some sort of mystifying sense, but in a sense of looking for answers.
So with questions like what happens after death,
again,
the body dies.
Any notion of death that you can have is based on this life. Thus, it's not really death, that which death is. So then you're asking a question based on what you think death is, what happens after it, well, it's doubly meaningless. Same, trying to understand how the workings of the karma and vipaka energies and whatnot. As the Buddha said, that's just going to result in distraction or madness. You can't fathom it because you don't need to. How the samsara operates. But instead, ask yourself, why do I want to know that? Why do I seek this form of knowledge? Why do I need that information? What for? What's the motivation behind? And you see the motivation behind every single action you ever done, you will ever do, and you're doing is motivated in how you feel or how you want to feel. Always. So you realize, okay, so what if I overcome the feelings? Then there's nothing for me to do anymore.
So, for example, if someone's looking for, I want to find out if there is a God, if God created.
Right.
If that's my mission.
Right.
So you're saying then that...
Ask yourself, why is that? Yeah. Why did you make that a mission of yours?
Because if I find out that there is a God...
What's going to happen?
I'll feel great.
Exactly. I'll feel satisfied, I'll feel at ease, you will feel pleasant. So then you realize that if you want to do something, your actions should be aimed at understanding the motivation for you wanting to do things in the first place, as in understanding motivation for your feeling being the reason for your action, feelings being the reason for your action.
So then, in terms of, if people want to know, how did the world begin? How did the universe begin?
The only reason they want to know that is because they think that answer will provide a satisfaction which is a form of pleasure. But on the level of a view almost. So then they have a view that they can apply throughout their life as everything will be fine. That's why people want to have the God exists and the heaven and stuff, just to provide that utmost general pleasure that then they can use to sort of go through life without fear and anxiety. But what they fail to see, because it's very unpleasant to see it, is that pleasure is still based on this life. Thus, you cannot really know anything different from it. So you cannot really know, oh yes, there is heaven after, or there is God, or there isn't a God. Because you're fully enclosed within yourself and within your own experience. And that's that honesty that's necessary to recognize that actually certain things cannot be known based on this experience. You cannot know how it would be to be outside of this experience. And even when you think about outside of this experience, that's within your experience. So then all the views that you hold on account of it, to like reinterpret the life back to yourself, which is a form of regaining the control. This is how the universe started, this is how the universe will end, this is heaven, this is hell. It's just a form of greater control over that which you know deep down you're not in control of. And that's why you're liable to feelings of fear and unpleasantness and so on.
To the science, looking into atoms.
Sorry?
Science looking into small atoms,
right?
Looking into distant
right.
horizons,
measuring the universe and the stars. Yeah.
That can bring benefit.
Well, it can bring benefit in terms of information about the world, about the matter of your experience, but not information about the tools you use to get that information, which is the tools of your senses, your mind, your thought, your intentionality, your feelings, your views. You can't reinterpret them through things that you discover based on them. They're secondary to it. That's why the Buddha said you won't reach the universe by traveling
to the end
of the world or something. The beginning and the end of the universe is in this very body, nowhere else. That's it. This very experience as a whole, that's your entire universe. And no matter how far you go in the universe, imagine, could you go without this body being there present? You couldn't. Could you even imagine it abstractly without this body being still alive here? You couldn't. No, you're fully enclosed in it. And that's the point that's useful to contemplate. It's not like you're bound with it as in you're tied to a post and then you can move around the post. No, you are within it. The body is the container. The senses are your container. The five aggregates are the container that you cannot conceive the outside of. That's what the Buddha said. Even people in meditation who would develop memory of the previous life, 1 previous life, 5 previous lives, 500 previous lives, all they would remember is these 5 aggregates or one among them. You can't step outside of it. An arahant doesn't step outside of it. He removes the slightest trace of ownership in regard to that experience as a whole. Slightest trace of ownership in regard to feelings, in regard to matter, feeling, perception, intentions, and consciousness. And that's how he disappears, so to speak. Frees himself from it.
And do you have any direct method to overcome this sense of ownership?
Contemplate through your ownership that which you own. So take up that which you regard as yours, and then see how, or rather where, it is rooted at. Whether in your sense of control, or whether in something else that it isn't yours. So, for example, the body, take up the body, my body. Is that sense of my body, is that the center of it? Or would this body be depending upon all these individual organs within that sense of ownership of this body that are required to be operating, that I cannot control? If those organs were to fail, would I be able to entertain the notion of this body is mine if this body dies right in front of me, so to speak? You realize you couldn't. So you're perverting the order by giving the priority of that sense of self, of my master of this body. And then when you think about the individual organs, you don't think about them within that sense of master. You think about left, right, before or after. That's where you don't uproot it. So the closest to a method would be to contemplate within this ownership. So you can't leave the ownership out and contemplate things rightly, because the whole point of contemplation is to experience the non-ownership. And you experience the non-ownership when you see that this body, no matter how much it's in your control, its heart is rooted in that which you cannot even conceive controlling, such as heart, breathing lungs, pumping blood, operating organs, functioning brain. You can't even conceive how it would be to control those things or have say in their operating. Yet they are the fundamental basis for the notion of your body as a whole that you do own. So mistakenly.
Because we think myself comes first.
Yes, people think I come first, thus this is for me, this is mine. It's the other way around. It's because I take all this to be mine, I develop a sense of I am. But that sense of I am can be undone, not by denying it, by saying, oh, there's no self, there's not really me, look, everything is changing, this is not... No, you need to take up that sense of I am, and then see that it's founded upon things that cannot be yours. Then automatically your experience is the experience of not I am.
Reversing the mistake.
Yeah, draining them. The kind of the structure stays the same, but what has drained away is that appropriation from it. That's why the Buddha would say for an arahant it's like a palm stump, cut at its root. So the stump, the branches that grown, they stayed, but now they're then done, they're petrified. They're still there as the way person's experience might have proliferated throughout the ignorant life. But once you uproot that ignorance, once you remove that appropriation, it stops proliferating and then just stays like a palm stump until even that breaks apart in parinibbana.
So if you lose that or get rid of that sense of ownership, your personality doesn't... How does your personality...
Well, anything in your personality that was depending upon the ownership, that will disappear. But there are other things that were not depending upon ownership. They were depending upon like hollow habits. Habits that were not rooted in greed, aversion, delusion. That stays. That's why, as I said many times, and in the suttas you read often, people cannot tell an arahant externally. And even another arahant cannot come and see some special aura around him. Oh, he's an arahant. No. They can tell an arahant when they start discussing each other's understanding of Dhamma. And they can see, oh yeah, he understood this probably to the extent. Of course, then the Buddha, or somebody with very, very developed mind, could see little traits, little things, and based on which he could tell the other person's mind. But on an average, you can't. Even like Sariputta couldn't tell. in some cases that the person was an arahant. Then he would go to the Buddha and said, where was his rebirth? And he says, what do you mean? Didn't he say he was an arahant? Yeah, he did, but he was associating with not some reputable families and so on. He said, well, that's not why a person is blameworthy. A person is blameworthy because they leave this body, they take another body, as in they remain bound with samsara. But I can tell you he wasn't. He wasn't blameworthy. He was an arahant even before he died. But Sariputta couldn't see it. So the other that famous one was like really harsh in his speech, and the people were often offended. And then the Buddha said, oh, it's his old habits. They were not rooted in ill will or greed or anything like that, but obviously he would come across as very angry, furious. Of course, that doesn't mean like, oh, okay, so I don't have to. You will know which habits can stay once you're an arahant or on the way of becoming one. You can't decide that beforehand. Oh, these are my neutral habits. So you have to take them all with caution. If you're in a state of putujana, you can't trust any of your habits. So you have to keep investigating any of it if it's rooted on greed, aversion, delusion. And truly, when you dismantle everything that shouldn't be there, whatever's left, then you know that can be left.
So this is very different from saying that the self doesn't exist. Or there is no self.
Yeah, the Buddha never said that. When he asked him, does the self exist? He wouldn't say it. Does the self does not exist? He wouldn't answer it. No, it's a shortcut. It's a quick fix in terms of satisfying explanation, but it's not a contemplation when you say there's no self. Look, all these rocks, they're constantly changing electrons and atoms, thus nothing is real, thus there is no self, this is just a hollow convention. Conventional speech and so on. No, that's not what the Buddha said.
Because you can
because
say
conventions are real as such. Yeah, you might not call it self, but the thing is that phenomena that you refer to as self, it's there. If it weren't there, you wouldn't be able to refer to it whatsoever. So dismissing the reality does not remove your ownership of that reality. Which means, so I should be concerned with me appropriating reality, not being concerned about dismantling conventions and proving that nothing exists. It's like instead of treating the illness in regard to the body, you just go and chop up the body. And say, see, the body can be chopped up, thus it's not real. No, it is real. As a collection of parts that can be chopped up. That's a reality. And that was never a problem. So there is that self. There is that sense of self. It's not that there is no self. But what you should do is remove the ownership of that sense of self. And then it becomes anatta. As in, not myself.
Because it's a practice of denial.
And actually, I don't want to say not myself, because then people might assume, someone else's self. No, anatta is self that you don't own, and that cannot be called self. So it's not self. So that which was taken as self, still there, but now it's not. Taken as not self. But people are concerned with denying that which is taken as self, which is an aspect of their experience, one way or the other. But as the Buddha said, the five aggregates are not the assumption, are not the holding, the view of the self. But there is no view of the self apart from the five aggregates. So it's desire and lust in regard to the five aggregates, that the view of self is there. By you coming and saying there is no self, the five aggregates are impermanent, there is no self, you're just dismissing it, the problem, and without actually understanding it. Because if you were to truly understand it, well, the only way to truly understand it is to free yourself from that self, to see it as not self. So any explanation that you think you understood, unless it's freeing you from that sense of self, don't think you understood it.
Because people can put a lot of time and effort in denial practice. Deny it for years and years.
Many of the meditation methods and techniques are all based on that view of just denial and seeing the moment-to-moment movement. They will kind of show you that somehow things are not really real, cannot be yours.
But that whole practice goes completely against being self-transparent, honest, authentic, saying this. I do experience this self. Yeah, exactly. I do experience this thing.
There is mother, there is father, there is given, there is offered.
There's no gender.
Yeah, well, okay, people can deny anything, whatever they please. Yes. As the attitude, it can be aimed literally at anything. That's why the Buddha said the worldly right view is the view that acknowledges the validity of random phenomena. of phenomena in your experience. No, there is this, there is given, there is mother, there is father, there is the liberation, there is the path. Allowing, like, you don't need to see them, and of course you don't see them at that level, but you need to know that there is a possibility of them being real, as in there is a possibility of being free. But if you keep denying everything, you will never accept that possibility as a present phenomenon. And that's the key. Accepting possibilities as a present negative phenomenon in your experience. Yeah, it's real. The possibility is real. I don't know how, to what extent, but I could find out if I apply myself. So you don't want to deny anything, really. You want to restrain yourself from what you were told it's unwholesome, greed, aversion, delusion, that you can see that it's unwholesome. And then within that, you don't need to deny further. That would be like overshooting the mark. You want to understand what's in front of you. That's what Buddha said. The whole universe is contained within this less than 6 foot long body, and so on. He didn't say this body is not real, thus none of the universe is real. There is no travel, there is no mother, there is no father, there is no life. Because there were those views at the time that he quite heavily criticized. Nobody gets killed, there's nothing, it's just elements. And actually, modern interpretation of Buddhist anatta, it's actually one of those wrong views back in the day that the Buddha criticized. When they say everything is comprised of constantly changing electrons, so nothing is real, or nothing can be mine, there is no self. And people believe that, whereby they said, oh, nobody gets killed. Even if you go and cut everybody on the left side of Ganges with a sharp sword, nobody gets killed. All that happens is the sword runs through the elements, runs through the electrons and atoms. You can just call it whatever you want. The view is the same. And the Buddha said it's a completely wrong view. Because you're blaming the 5 aggregates for your assumption, for your sense of self. Failing to see that it's desire and lust in regard to the 5 aggregates, that the sense of self is there. But it's not the 5 aggregates. So you killing the 5 aggregates does not free you from the sense of self. Hence, person who is not freed from the sense of self, when the 5 aggregates disintegrate, as in when they die, they're still there. They get reborn.
Yeah, it reminds me of when someone's got a problem, and it's like, complaining about, trying to talk it out, and then I don't know the answer, but anyway, everything's impermanent. So anyway, it's okay. So it's like this. Oh well. I've got this problem, but I'll just deny it now.
No, unfortunately, it's prevalent as a view, but it's just rooted in lazy self-reflection. Like in self-reflection that doesn't go far enough. So then you just put a cap on it by saying, well, it's all impermanent anyway, so I won't bother with it. I'll just, watch my breath and be peaceful and live a simple life. You can live life as simply as you want, as a vegetable, and still remain equally ignorant. And that's the problem. It's not how complex your life is. Of course, you want to simplify it, because it can be too much to start with, to practice, but that's secondary. That's just creating the suitable condition for you to understand what's right in front of you. But thinking that the goal of your life is to simplify it, or to just do this, just do that, without making the effort to understand it and go through that unpleasantness of unraveling the deep existential feelings of fear and anxiety, there's no practice without that.